Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Certified Forgotten. We check in. It's a good idea to check in, right? Check-ins are good. They're part of any healthy relationship. So we always like to start by saying we're checking in and letting you know that we're still the only podcast we know that talks about horror films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. If that ever changes, you'll be like the 15th person to know. Honestly, there's like a whole pecking order of people we would probably freak out with. But until that day, I'm here. I'm Matt Monagle. I'm one half of your hosts. I am joined, as always, by my friend, by my partner in crime, Matt Donato. Donato, how is your 2024 kicking off?
I mean, it couldn't be as bad as 2023, could it? So it's getting better. Why not? One step at a time, you know?
Dude,
I'm not,
it's 10 days, man. What the fuck?
I don't believe in the whole, new year, new me kind of stuff. Cause I don't know, 23 sucked. I don't believe it's going to get immediately better in 2024, but I have optimism that eventually in 2024, things will even out. This is going to be somewhat of my year.
Okay. Well, every year since they turned on the mass halcyon collider or whatever has just been we've been in the bad place for a while, but it's okay. 10 days in the new year, we got plenty of time. We can right the ship, and if the ship goes down, then we can at least be one of the survivors that swims to the island. Speaking of ways that we're going to turn around the new year, we've got a really cool return guest, and we're going to talk about a really cool movie. And if that can't get your energy up for 2024, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, this is easy for me because this is number 3 episode, returning number 3, which I think is our top or tied for top. So congratulations, number 1. Once again, you will hear Harmony Colangelo from This Ends at Prom. Harmony, welcome back for a third time.
Yay, I will always be happy to be here as long as I can keep finding bogus movies that no one's heard of.
You know what I love though? Like legitimately, there are a few people, one of them being yourself and another being Michael Verratti, also friend of the show, friend of everyone here, and like 2 more people that will just hit me up randomly and be like, yo, I found a perfect movie. And it's so refreshing because sometimes we do need a guest very quickly because we fall
Mhm.
behind on scheduling and things like that. And it's like, it helps so tremendously. So thank you for being proactive and finding weird fucking movies that keep fitting our podcast.
My favorite thing about it is that this is now the second time I've gone, let's watch a movie, and I hadn't actually seen it yet.
Oh, really?
Nope,
Oh,
hadn't
that's
seen this
interesting.
yet.
Okay, we're going to save that for the movie half, but that's going to be the first question I ask you when we kick it off, because that was watching this movie. I was like, oh, I totally understand why someone would want to talk about this movie specifically. You went on vibes and you won, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, for folks that are checking in maybe for the first time, I want to remind you, Harmony. This is Harmony's third time on the show. Harmony has guested for Wild Zero, which was episode 43, and then Bit, which was episode 55. Both of those are available in all the places you find podcast episodes. If you want to go all the way back to Wild Zero, you can hear Harmony talk about her origins as a horror fan and how all of that came to be, and kind of the normal backstory stuff that we do with the first time guest. But today, sort of in honor of the film that we're talking about, we were like, maybe let's talk a little bit about rock musicals, because that is the film that we're going to discuss. And I think one of those interesting and rare areas where the three of our taste, and I don't always have trouble aligning our taste, but probably there's a decent amount of crossover, at least in what kind of rock musicals we like, what we look for, things like that. So Harmony, let's start with you. What are some, and I know that it's actually BJ's poster in the background. I see the Phantom of the Paradise poster back there. So obviously, you are a rock musical household.
Oh, of course. Like, before I came in here, I was like, BJ, I'm going to go talk about vampires and musicals. Do you love me yet? But yeah, like there's Phantom of the Paradise. There's also like Rocky Horror right there as well.
Mm.
So like Phantom of the Paradise is one BJ introduced me to. Rocky Horror is like, oh, I was down from like 13 on with that one. But I love rock musicals. I love like a rock opera that doesn't even need a movie form, where it's like, oh, classic Alice Cooper or Dream Theater's Scenes from a Memory. Like there's so many of these like theatrical story driven rock albums that are so we'll say ostentatious, but in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And like the dumber the rock opera gets, sort of the more fun it has. Like it gets rid of the indulgences and just goes down to like, whatever, we're just telling a story, we're having a stupid good time. And this is one of those kind of movies. That's kind of what Rocky Horror is about. I just think that's great. That's rad.
And when you think about like when somebody says rock musical to you, are you thinking that it is a like what is that if like what has to be a because there's the ones where the band is the one that like writes the music but it's not necessarily like their album. Then there's the stuff like, you know, to talk about the star of today's film, Tommy, where it is actually the music from the band and like it's sort of a what I think we would now call more of a jukebox musical. Is there like a mode of that you are more drawn to than others?
Not specifically. I've always had a specific love for like theatrical sounding music.
Mm.
That's just like I love Jim Steinman. I love Bat Out of Hell. I desperately want to see the Bat Out of Hell musical at some point, which means I'll probably have to make a pilgrimage to Vegas. But any kind of like loud theatrical music has always struck me as fun and quite quite direct, quite simple in a way that's endearing because I just like you to tell me how you're feeling. And that's like the opposite of how most movies are supposed to be, where it's like, no, you can't just have characters tell you how they feel. That's bad character development. But
Yeah.
with a musical, like you're feeling things so large and so pronounced that you just have to sing about it. That's just, that's easy. That's digestible. But also it is like triumphant. It's screaming from the rooftops with the loudest possible score. Like, that's great. It's so refreshing. Like it was when I was in high school. It probably was in the 70s when they did the Tommy movie. It was in the 80s when they did this. I think it's always going to be a thing that's really, really euphoric and great.
Well, I just came from, well, it didn't just come from, but last night I was able to see Mean Girls, and it's such a random example, but looking at Mean Girls, the movie, the original one, that's not a musical, it's
Mm-hmm.
funny. Like, it's a better movie, it's a better film, the bullying message, everything comes through and all that stuff. But watching the musical last night, I will still, every night of the week, take a lyrical driven kind of like theatrical message because yes, I know I've seen Mean Girls. I know what it's getting at. I know everything
Mm-hmm.
it's rallying it for and against. And yet hearing it through song is still so much more like emotionally impactful to me. Like that's the one I would watch if I wanted to feel something. Where Mean Girls is the
Mm.
one I would want to watch if I just, the non-musical, if I just wanted to kind of laugh and stuff. And yeah, I've always found that like just even little indie films where it's about just a rock star singing some songs and singing their heart out. It's like I am drawn to that. I am drawn to
Mm-hmm.
everything about expression of self through music. And you talking about all the like old school bands, Meatloaf, Steinman, all that stuff, and like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Carnival 9 is just
Mm-hmm.
one of those ones that just goes through my head, and it's all of like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just so theatrical. That's everything I want from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like Harmony that you were talking about sort of the maximalism piece too, because I've talked a little bit on this podcast and elsewhere that I was a musical theater kid in high school and college. I auditioned for, went out for, and got the lead role in The King and I as a junior in high school.
Oh.
It was a very different time, very different time. 2001.
Nerd.
It was a little different. In hindsight, had no business doing that. But um, honestly, when I think about kind of like the stuff that really helped me find kind of that niche even before that is I remember, I am the son of two former like hardcore hippie parents who are now like devout Catholics, and so they've had quite a journey. But I remember that when growing up, there was this box of cassette tapes that they used to have in the garage, and it was all the music that they used to listen to, right? So like all of the singer songwriter stuff, all of like the weird acid kind of rock stuff that they used to have. And I remember I was mowing lawns when I was like in middle school, just I would go through my parents' cassette tapes and be like, I need to listen to something, have my headphones in. And I found Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to Pink Floyd's The Wall. It must have been like 14 years old, 13, 14 years old. And that shit blew my mind out the side of my head sideways. I thought it was just like the coolest thing, like the most self-indulgent thing I've ever heard. It's that maximalism piece. It's why we love musicals and horror. It's just like the most of it. And so I think that there's always been a part of me that is definitely drawn to stuff that you put it well, Harmony. That's just sort of like the most of a thing, and especially in musicals, yeah, there can be sort of the conventional stuff you see on Broadway where there's like characters singing about their love songs, but sometimes it's just like we can't just do this by script anymore. We have to have like a rock ballad here because it has to like where there's going to be pyrotechnics and like a sound stage in the background and like fireworks, just because we need to. It's the only way we can express ourselves. That's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun.
Yeah, I think especially when like certainly when rock musicals started to become a thing. I think of like Phantom of the Paradise or Rocky Horror specifically, those are not movies that are made with a large budget. So they had to create spectacle in very different ways. Like Tommy was made not because like the script of Tommy is so good. It was made because the Who wanted to make Tommy the movie. Same thing with like the Sergeant Pepper movie that is not great. Uh, it's just I think that there's something really elegant and clever about having to make a musical, which is supposed to be about like splendor and decadence and showmanship, and having
Mhm.
to do that with no money. I think that that is so hard and so it feels like a puzzle. It feels like something that you are just trying to solve how to do. And I think that's what our movie today does a really, really good job of. But I don't know. There's something so indomitable about like that kind of spirit that I like about things like this, especially when it came to like primitive instruments in like the 70s where it's like in terms of production, in terms of how you produced music, it was novel when you started to bring like orchestras into the studio with bands in the 60s. It was fascinating when you started to experiment with different genres and tap dancing and harpsichord and all this other stuff and create more of a larger soundscape post the Beatles stopping to tour because you could do that on a record.
Yeah.
And I love mixing these genres with rock because it's supposed to be this primal stripped down thing, but that doesn't mean you can't just find ways to make it larger and more splendorous.
That's why I gravitate towards. I love Stage Fright, not the old school slasher, but the newer
The one with
musical.
Meatloaf?
Yeah, the one with Meatloaf, like a
Yeah.
huge cast. It's so good, but I love it for that reason of theater kids doing theater kids stuff, but the killer's heavy metal and the
Mm-hmm.
clashing of metal and like all like it just makes it so much fun. You get the different kind of tonal differences, you get the different kind of musical approaches, and I think that I love a musical that will take those moments to not just be one genre, not just be one thing. And I think going back to what you were saying about, it's so entertaining to watch a low budget, musical, horror musical, whatever kind, because it is just such like a huge feat to accomplish. But I think it's also something that tells like the mark of a really good filmmaker, I would say, because not only are they making a movie, but they're also composing an entire score. They're telling a story through song. I think that is so much harder to me. And you don't have a budget, number one. You're trying to do all the movie things and the filmmaking things, let alone. And then you just throw an entire set list on top of it and have to throw that in and make that flow. I think when you watch a indie musical and it just works so well, that's how you know like the coming talent is just like, oh yeah, this is like a filmmaker to watch out.
Mm-hmm. I can hear like Anna and the Apocalypse behind every word you're saying right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Donato wears that on his sleeve, like literally,
Oh,
actually
yeah.
now, like, or not your sleeve, sorry, your upper forearm or
On my
whatever,
flesh. It is
on your
literally
flesh.
painted on my flesh.
It's part of a sleeve.
It's part of his sleeve, yes. What will eventually be a tattoo sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you said about kind of the compositional piece too, because I think one thing that I'm really drawn towards with rock musicals is the notion that like we think of a lot of times we think of artists as being people that are producing the music that they're doing, but in a lot of cases like whatever band you become famous with is a member of, and we can think of like a Johnny Greenwood, right, who started, famous because of Radiohead, but is now a celebrated both classical composer and film composer in his own right. There is usually a lot more musicality, music education, like musical interest and aptitude there that is fun to watch folks explore. And that can take a lot of variety of kind of looks. Like there's a musical that's based on a book called Working, if anybody's ever heard of Working, which was a collection of essays that were written, I think it was in the 1980s. This anthropologist kind of went around to places in middle America and interviewed people that worked for a living and like took down their stories. And so it's a collection of sort of like essays that are written about like what it was like to be a waiter in this part of the world or to be doing something else. And they adapted it into a musical. James Taylor wrote the music, and just kind of like the stuff that he brings as sort of a folksy songwriter really elevated it. But
Mm-hmm.
then I think of one of my favorite musicals, which is Chess. Two
Oh,
thirds to half of the band ABBA
mm-hmm.
wrote the music for that. It's about the kind of like the chess tournaments as a microcosm for U.S. and Russian relations in the 1980s. It is bombastic and it is huge and it has like at least 3 bangers. And most people know it because it's got One Night at Bangkok. So even if you don't know chess, you actually know chess. But it's so fun to listen to career musicians step outside of the boxes that they've been put in and see how much more these folks have to offer and what other musical ideas are kind of kicking around out there.
Oh, totally. Like there's so many examples of that, whether that be like Phineas and Ferb, which has the guy from My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and also Fountains of Wayne. Trent Reznor's obviously like he's at this rate, he might get an EGOT. Like he's a
Yeah.
Tony away from getting an EGOT, which is insane.
They will.
Craig of the Creek, which I love very much, has a musical episode and then the musical movie. It's done by my dude Jeff Rosenstock, who is just the best. I think that there's just so many ways that a musician is able to express themselves outside of the genre that they are known for. And being given the scope of story, given a new environment in which to apply their music, is such a fascinating. It's almost like an exercise in creativity and pushing oneself, which kind of comes to with the indulgence of what like a rock opera is.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that they're having a blast doing it too.
Oh,
like that's the whole point to me of just, you said, like all these musicians taking on something different. And I mean, as recently as like Studio 666, like Dave Grohl got to be a metalhead for a little bit again. And, you know, he's done Probot and he's done little projects here and there with that. But, you know, getting to record a whole album as Dream Widow, and it just sounds nothing like the stuff they're doing now, which has gone like more alternative than the rock stuff. So yeah, I'm a sucker for any kind of musician showing up in a movie, whether it's a musical or not, and getting to like do something different. There's one called Suck, which is a horror vampire musical, rock and opera, whatever you want to say. Like it's actually everything that this movie is, but without the snooker. And like Moby.
Wait, hold on. No, sorry. It's everything this movie is without the snooker.
Yep.
Snooker is like 80 fucking % of this movie. How do you?
That's exactly that. So
all right.
Yeah, it's like 20% of this movie.
Okay, fair enough.
But like Moby shows up as a metalhead throwing meat at the audience, like he's Steve Aoki with a cake, and like that gets me. Like Moby is not known for that kind of stuff, but when like somebody wants to go do something else and be like, no, there's another type of music that I can go throw out there, like I'm a sucker for that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So when y'all are maybe kind of like watching something, discovering something, this movie today obviously is I think a new discovery for all of us. How, like, what is your process for sort of absorbing a new rock musical, a new movie musical into sort of your collection or lexicon? Is it like love at first sight? Do you need to kind of listen to stuff? I ask because Donato knows that I'm not the world's biggest fan of Anna and the Apocalypse, but I'm starting to like think I need to go back and rewatch it and certainly listen to the music a little bit. But I'm sort of curious if for y'all, because you know music and movies are kind of like the hyper powered version of both. Do you know kind of instantly? Is there sort of the same, like I revisited it, I thought about it, I might have changed my mind? Because I feel like with a musical for me, I'm either it's either immediate yes, or it's probably something I'm not going to ever circle around. And there's just something about that combination that my first instinct usually doesn't change in the way that it might with other movies. So Harmony, starting with you, is it like, do you know immediately, or do you find your tastes change a little bit over time?
It depends. Some come easier than others. I think the first thing I noticed is like sonically, how does it sound? Like, how are the songs written? What instruments do they use? What is the tone? How are the singers themselves? Like, I'm a sucker for character voices, and the movie that we're going to discuss today is basically a bunch of character actors having the time of their life, which is so my thing. But I think that there needs to be something to hook me, whether that be the story, the lyrics, the music. Something is got to click immediately and make me come back and then reanalyze the additional parts of it. So I'm sure that there's examples, but I couldn't think of what they are off the top of my head for where something didn't quite work for me, but then grew on me because I don't know. I like all sorts of music. I've been putting together a playlist for our Patreon all day that is basically like, here's a bunch of songs by bands that do not sound like what they normally sound like. And that includes like the first Smash Mouth album where they are a kick-ass punk band. That first album's really good. Or like, here's Cyndi Lauper doing a country album. By the way, the first Goo Goo Dolls album was like this trash hardcore punk band in the late 80s. Just I want to hear all of these different genres and sounds and have people experiment with them until they find the thing that works for them. That's fascinating to me. And I think musicals operate sort of the similar way, where I want to find all of the pieces that come together and work for me.
Hmm.
Yeah, for me, you can get away with more as a movie if your musical elements are on par. I
Hmm.
think the easiest example for me is when we did the episode with Cezanne and we did "Don't Go in the Woods" from Vincent D'Onofrio, and I mean it's a rough around the edges movie. If we're not looking at the music, it's
Sure.
very much low budget, just some people in the woods. Logic is a little out there. It's a rough experience if you're just looking at a movie, but seeing it a second time, so like the first time it really didn't click with me in a certain way. I was like, I like the music, but the movie's just not good enough to get there. And then we rewatch it for the podcast. I talk on the episode about it a little bit, and like I came around on it more because the music was in a place that like it is telling a pretty interesting story, and it is put together, like it's composed very well.
Hmm.
So seeing that a second time and really digesting that like an album versus movie music separate, I think that gave me a reappreciation, let's say, like for a movie like that. But it's also really like easy to lose me on a musical too, because like if your first two songs aren't there, like I'm out. Like you're not, you
Oh,
need to hook
really?
me, you need to get me in
Hmm.
those first few songs. After that, it becomes a struggle, I think.
I don't want you to take this the wrong way, Donato, but I don't think of you as a particularly tough sell on movie musicals. I feel like in a good
Yeah.
way. Like I feel like you're usually, when I talk to you about any kind of like musicals I've seen, especially if they have a foot in the genre world, you usually come from a place of enthusiasm. I just feel like that's a niche that you really like. So I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that you have sort of like that 2 track maximum in terms of, like reading the first 30 pages of a book and then being like, nope, didn't hook me. For you, it's the first two songs of a musical.
Yeah, like 2 to 3 songs, because like that's setting the tone for the rest of the movie. And if you don't
Hmm.
hit me in the right way, like it's just like an album. Like if you're listening to an album and the first 2 to 3 songs aren't pulling you in, like what are the chances you're going to keep going through it? Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's kind of an important thing.
Album structure is just as important as like musical structure. Like a good album needs a good opener. If you don't have a very good opener, then it sets a bad tone for your album. Like that's just the same thing for any kind of piece of music. Is you need a hook, you need some sort of energy, you need some sort of
Mhm.
anticipation, world building, whatever it be. It needs to set the tone right.
Well, as we're thinking about like bands that have or artists that do have kind of like their vanity, you mentioned Sergeant Pepper's a little bit earlier. Examples like that. I'm curious if there are any like bands. Studio 666 is the one that you dropped, Donato. If there's any other like artist vanity projects, movies built around a particular artist that really moves the needle for y'all, because I'm kind of like in my head trying to feel like if I can make a case for Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. I'm not
Oh, I
sure that
can. I was just gonna
I'm
say the
not
Pick
sure
of
that I
Destiny now.
can. I'm not sure that I can. It's a
I
little
will
rough.
say Pick of Destiny 1,000%. That movie is so
Okay.
dumb. And again, the music works though in that Tenacious D kind of way. Like Kyle and Jack Black are very good at being entertaining and
Hmm.
musicians. Like they can do both. So they have the right sensibility to take us from start to finish through the musical journey that I think a lot of people don't have. I think they are extremely good at it if you are into their sense of humor and what they do. Like that is the major caveat there.
Yeah. Is there something about metal that makes that easier? Just like because it is such a flamboyant or metal rock, whatever you, I'm not a genre purist, obviously.
I mean, metal is kind of inherently a dumb genre about a lot of variety of topics because, like, it's about singing about like demons and gods and slaying things, and I'm gonna still throw up the horns and rock my face off. It's inherently like got really straightforward and also really visually stunning imagery. I think that if you accept that metal's kind of fucking stupid, then you enjoy it more, and it lends itself quite well to musicals, I think.
And that's Deathgasm is not a musical, but music is a huge part of
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
like that is the thing. It is understanding that metal is inherently dumb in some ways. It is, I'm sure plenty of other people will argue the opposite, and I agree. I appreciate metal a great deal and have plenty of examples that I would argue, like, yeah, no, there's a lot of deep meaning here and stuff, but there is a there is a subset of metal that is very dumb. And like when you clue into the stories and the backstories behind it, I mean, like, Lords of Metal is one thing alone, and that gets dark and evil and all that shit. But like, Deathgasm hits on that comedy element. And is it easier to watch because of it? Yeah, because it's some dumb metalheads who get the wrong message and take things the wrong way. Like that's
Hmm.
part of the culture, and that is part of the things that is both entertaining and frustrating about being a metal fan.
I mean, aren't you also a huge fan of Metalocalypse?
Fuck yeah. Oh, massive. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, same kind of thing.
It knows it's dumb. Brendan
Mhm.
Small is very good.
Yep.
And that's one of the areas that Donato and I have our biggest. I think that probably one of the OG points of crossover for you and I was our shared love of Todd versus the Book of Pure Evil, the musical episode of that show as well, which is just like just perfection, just beautiful, beautiful things. Every TV show that runs even more than a season should do a musical episode. I personally think.
Mhm.
But you know, nobody hires me to greenlight these things. I just want to be the person, the consultant that you come in and basically like sit in a room and I'm like, you need a musical episode. That's the only advice I ever give. And there's somebody's just calling me in to have outside people confirm what they already know, that it's time to make those fuckers in Breaking Bad sing, is what I'm saying.
Of course.
Could you imagine the fucking Hill House episode music if it was a musical? Like just one episode of Hill House, just fucking dark and depressing, and a Mike Flanagan horror musical.
What is musicals if not monologue set to music, right? So there we go. Mike Flanagan's already there. All right, I feel like we're itching to talk about the film Harmony that you brought us today. So we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna put this theory, all these conversations we've had about rock and movie musicals, into practice, and discuss, among other things, snooker, which is 80% of today's movie, which apparently is Donato's was the least interesting part of that for you. So when we come back, it's gonna be time to talk about Billy the Kid and the Green Baize Vampire. Okay, welcome back. So this week on Certified Forgotten, we're going to talk about Billy the Kid and the Green Baize Vampire. Sometimes I write my own synopses for these. Sometimes I pull things that I find online. IMDb has pulled a random user synopsis for their for their profile for this film, and I liked it enough that I'm going to read it here. So this comes courtesy of a Roisin Moriarty. We have their email address thanks to IMDb too. I don't know why you did that. That doesn't seem like a great idea. But Roisin writes, cocky, flatulent, cockney snooker player Billy Kidd accepts the challenge of a grudge match from Maxwell Randall, also known as the Green Baize Vampire, 6-time world champion. The loser will never play professional snooker again. Oh, the humanity. Brilliant, succinct writing from IMDb user Roisin Moriarty. Thank you so much for that. Harmony, I said I was going to ask you kind of the audaciousness of picking a film that you didn't know, that you hadn't already seen. So what made this the one you wanted to bring to us?
Well, I don't even remember where I found this movie. It was just on my watch list for a long time because it wasn't on Tubi for a long time, which is where you can currently get it. I found a vampire versus a cowboy and went, huh, that's interesting. Oh, they're playing billiards. That's also interesting. And it's a musical. Okay, this is at the very least going to be interesting. There's no way this can't somehow catch my attention. And I put it on. BJ and I are watching it, and this is after I've already talked to Donato about us doing it at like Thanksgiving. I'm like, anyway, here's a movie. We should do it. I put it on, and we're like a couple songs in, and I'm like, wait, is this shot really well? Like, wait, is their camera work good? Like, the lighting's good. For this movie has no, like, and the opening credits do not do you any favors. It's like public access. There's just names on screens. It looks terrible. But like by the time you get to like the third song, fourth song, wherever it is, where it's Supersonic Sam's Cosmic Cafe, I'm like, oh, this man with the sideburns is taking me to church. I am so in.
That's a good way to put it. So Donato, first impressions from you, and then I want to dig a little bit more into the surprisingly well shot film that we had today.
I didn't know what to expect at any point coming into this because Harmony is 100% right. We were talking at Thanksgiving and they were just like, yeah, no, I've got a movie. I haven't even watched it. It sounds insane. And I was like, that does sound insane. You should watch that and let me know. So I get this excited text later and I'm just like, oh, so we have to cover this now. First impressions, it's everything you expect from what you have described, which again is completely unexpected because I've never seen a movie like this. I mean, the comparison points are out there, obviously, but it's a sports drama. It's a musical. It is the horror comedy. It is a vampire, but there's no blood sucking. There's so many things going on here that don't make sense. But it's one of those rare cases where so many stars just align, and it is a once in a million kind of thing. Like, this shouldn't work. None of that. This should work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have a moment about halfway through where you just kind of take stock and say, the music is actually really good here. It's going to be up, it is a lot of snooker playing. Maybe that's your thing. Maybe it isn't. I wasn't bothered by it. I was just like making the joke by it before. Like, it is well shot. It is fun watching everything happen here. Like, it's a fucking dead vampire under a snooker table. Like that is, that's good. That is good visual storytelling. That is good. So I like the insane reaches this movie takes. And like, is it my favorite horror musical? No, it's not my favorite, but am I utterly impressed by what I have seen? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is something I would add to my collection.
And I'm sure that both of you know some of this stuff. For those that are kind of curious about, okay, there's a vampire, there's Billy the Kid, Billy Kid. I'll do my best to demystify at least the vampire portion of this. So this musical is partially inspired by a real life snooker player. His name is Ray Reardon. He was a professional snooker player during the 1970s, and he went by the name of Dracula because he had a prominent widow's peak and sharp eye teeth, the Dracula teeth. He played that up. He would come, and play tournaments in capes and things like that, and really played, by all accounts, a lovely human being, especially for being a professional athlete in the 1970s, very, very chill. But he was, in a sport that didn't even have professional rankings until I think 1976, when Reardon was the first person to ever be named, the number one overall snooker player in the world. He was kind of the person that helped put this sport on the map. And so a lot of theatricality, a lot of fun pop and circumstance with him as a professional athlete. And the film obviously takes sort of a more kind of what if he was a vampire. The fact that the fact that Maxwell is a vampire is actually a surprisingly subdued element in this movie. I think Donato, you put it best. Like, this is kind of a sports movie, like, more than anything else, which was absolutely shocking to me. It's kind of like a class warfare. Again, I think of chess, like class coming together over, table games kind of thing. But I don't, if you heard what we were saying and I told you that there's elements of fact in all of this, I hope I didn't ruin it for you listeners. You should definitely go still watch it, because it is a vampire who's playing billiards. That's fun, but it is based at least partially on some truth.
No, like, comparing it to chess, though, is I think the best way for people, because the way I see it online, especially on like the DVD that I bought, is that it's Rocky Horror meets Little Shop of Horrors, and that's not at all what this is. Like, it's Rocky Horror in that it's like kind of ramshackle and cheap, but no, it's way closer to chess, because like, these are theater songs. This is minimal set design. It's a bunch of stuff shot like music videos. Like, so much of this stuff is lit like a Bauhaus music video. It is like a concept that they decided to turn into something bigger than just a concept. And the concept itself kind of doesn't work. But because you went so hard, it works tremendously.
Well, and the concept is, Billy the Kid in the title. It does allude to Westerns. Like, there are lines in the film, and I forget if it's part of lyrics or just dialogue, but like, it calls out the fact of how much this is like Billy the Kid watching a Western and gunslingers and all this stuff. And the generational stuff is all there. But then it absolutely is the sports drama it is sold as. Like, the conflict here is just about a snooker tournament. It's not about like even a vampire having to kill people and play snooker. It's just about the tournament. It's just about the rookie coming to beat the old vet and what that means. So like, you get both of those elements, and like, the whole Devil Went Down to Georgia thing about it too is just like, everything comes together in, once again, a way that should not fucking work. And you're talking about one of those miracle movies where, Harmony, you just said it, like, it goes so hard into what it wants to do, and it doesn't care if it works or not, and that's why it does. It just goes full force into it. Like, they have a warehouse to shoot it. Like, that's it. Everything is in this dark, dingy warehouse, but because of the lighting and the setups, it feels like different. Billy's apartment is absolutely just a room in the warehouse, but it feels like an apartment. Like, where they hold the tournament is absolutely just a room in that same warehouse, but it looks completely different. Just the lighting, the setting. There's a lot of thought put into that stuff, the little technical flourishes.
It almost feels very dystopian in a way, which
Hmm.
adds to the like class warfare between like these tattooed shitty punks versus the upper class bourgeoisie. And it's like that's not necessarily what people watch this movie for. They watch it because like look at all these silly things that are happening at once, but that is the underlying themes of like the conflict and the setting. And I think that that's also really great that this goes far deeper than you would initially give it credit for.
Well, I that's actually kind of what hooked me a bit because I was soft out after like the first 15 or 20 minutes. I think we've kind of hit on like the opening credits don't do it any favors, and there's kind of like singular location, and the acting, depending on your perspective, ranges from the highly stylized to the occasionally stiff. So like you can decide as a viewer where you fall on that kind of spectrum. I think there's a really good argument to be made that everybody's the artificialness is there intentionally, and that's part and parcel of what they're trying to do. But I think what did kind of like I picked up during the what's the name of the game room, the like Cascade Palace or whatever they called it, when we meet Billy the Kid's entourage for the first time, and they're all in front of these, like cutting edge, probably Pong or fucking,
Uh-huh.
Donkey Kong screens that they're playing, where it really kind of leans into the 1984 like Ridley Scott commercial kind of like dystopia vibe and look and feel for it. And that became, thinking about something like Quadrophenia and sort of like the mods versus the old class thing. I was sort of like, oh, in its own way, this is as much a British film about youth and revolt as insert literally anything from the last 30, like pick whatever highly stylized film you want. It's doing it in a very weird way with a very unique subject matter, but it's tapping into sort of like the anti-consumerism 1980s. I had to pause the movie to Google like green stamps because I was like, there's been like 3 songs about green stamps. I don't know what the fuck green stamp is. Then I learned about it. It was we called them the grocery store that I went to price smashers, which is like you fill up a sheet full of coupon like stickers that you would get for spending X amount of dollars, and you would turn those in and have cash prizes. So like it's rampantly kind of engaging with the disassociated youth, consumer culture, and that's subtext, but it's really interesting subtext. And what I realized, for me, I realized, oh, if we're doing this, then I am going to start giving you the benefit of the doubt on all the other stuff that may or may not be working for me. And once that happened, the whole movie kind of locked into place for me.
Oh, for sure. I don't. I just that's something that I didn't pay attention to initially when we were watching it because I was just giddy, going like, "Why is it good? How is it good?" And like
Yeah.
I'm turning to BJ, going like, "I'm not just a sucker who's caught up in the moment. Like these are genuinely good songs, right?" But then I'm watching it, and it's like, "Oh no! Like they make no qualms about that being the core of the movie. Like even like late in the game where it's like the second to last song where you have punks quacking at them in like what is essentially like a waiting room during like halftime of snooker, like there's constant animosity and it's not stupid about it.
Yeah.
One of the opening lines that we get from Maxwell when he's first being interviewed, and he's again talking to the reporter, and they immediately start needling about snooker and how the game is changing, and Maxwell just shouts out like, "They have green hair," like something like that. Like he's so mad that the fact that somebody good at snooker is a punk and has green hair, and it is that very much again way more old school. Obviously, this is an older film, but the generational gap there and the way that it was perceived. And my parents are still people of like, well, you have a job, you can't have tattoos, stuff like that. Like it's it is an old school mentality that has not been shaken, but to see it so like blatant here is like, oh yeah, it was a much bigger deal, like this whole punks versus again the upper class, the upper crust, and it'll never go away. But
Yeah.
it was interesting to see it here in like a little time capsule kind of way.
Oh yeah, and like I love that we're so. I think it's safe to say that all three of us are pretty well enraptured by this movie, and it's about snooker, a game that we don't really play in this country.
Yes. I mean, I'm fucking I'm more likely to go see some fucking rowing movie and be like, oh yeah, that's me. I could do that. Like I'm fucking terrible at pool, and so watching a pool movie, like just watching I could like I don't it would they would have canceled the production on the amount of takes it would have gotten just to do one of like the medium shots of like where the body's in frame. But like as long as you can do cutaways for all of this, like I could do it. But yeah, it does. Again, that's the sports moviness of it. It actually makes pool look pretty good. Like, it's not cheap. People, I don't know if the actors were making those shots. I don't know who was making those shots, but people were making those shots. Those were fucking hard shots that some of them were making. And the biggest surprise for me again is just how good of a sports movie it is on top of all the other weird stuff that's going on.
How many sports musicals are they even? I'm sure there are some, but I don't know of any off the top of my head.
I was racking my brain before we started recording. I can't think of anything.
Yeah, that usually doesn't cross over too well. I'm sure on Broadway there's way more, but like as a movie, that really doesn't cross over. But I mean,
Yankees, I guess that's it. It's
but like talking
Yankees.
about the cinematography like that, I do wonder if that was them actually hitting the shots, because there were a lot of wide frames there, and it didn't look like they were swapping anybody with like a bad wig or something and to make the shots. Like it looked like the regular people, which only adds another level of complexity and hilarity to like, okay, we have to cast this musical with people who are extremely good at snooker, and like that pool has to be like the shallow end of a fucking kiddie pool.
Oh yeah, and like mind you, they also have to be able to sing. Everyone in this movie can sing, and a couple people are really, really good.
Yeah, and I think Harmony to that point too, like good in different styles of music, right? Because again, like listening to this, there was a part of me at about the 15-minute mark that was like, I know what this is. I've seen direct to video kind of stuff like this before. I'm worried that I'm out. And they just kept doing things that were so clearly stylistically intentional. And I think the other one, I can't remember the name of the number, but the something about bite. What is
Oh,
the
like I Bite Back.
I Bite Back? Thank you, thank you. The big Alan Armstrong number as Maxwell. I Bite Back was stylistically so different than every other song that happened in the show, and they were like full mask off libretto, like it was Gilbert and Sullivan style, like with flourishes of prog rock in it, and I was like, oh, okay, all of this is like I another moment of like, I give you the benefit of the doubt, I see what you're doing, and I like it. But that's a tough, like that's opera. That is opera that they were singing there, and the two leads needed to be able to sing that really well. Like it's one thing when you have people that are, performing in sort of the high falsetto style of like the Jesus Christ Superstarness of it all. You can find people that do that because that's what they do. But there's an element of flexibility to the styles of singing that this movie required song to song that I was really impressed by.
Oh yeah, like a few songs later, when we're in Billy the Kid's apartment, and they have the like number about how Tio is going to take him to the top. That starts as like a slow, very like off rhythm western, and then goes into this huge anthemic Broadway number. It's so good.
It's worth noting, just real quick, sorry, Donato. It's worth noting that the music is by George Fenton, who has been nominated 5 times in his career for Academy Awards.
Good.
He wrote the scores to Dangerous Liaisons and Gandhi, are probably the two that most people would recognize. Very stylistically, musically similar to the movie we watched today.
Oh, of course. But the legitimacy of it all.
Correct. Sorry, Donato, please.
No, I was gonna say, I think my favorite though, like mentioning the songs and stuff like that, is the announcer when he's announcing the snooker tournament and bringing out Maxwell and Billy, and his name is Neil McCall. Big Jack J is his character, and just one more different element of the film. It does feel so big and grand and like big, like showmanship there is like almost carnivalesque in the way that it turns into like a ringmaster commanding the room. And I like that was my song. That was the one that I was like, oh shit, like the one that starts with the quacks, amazing, love it, 10 out of 10. I'm just like, again, what is happening? But to see, like, talking about the musicianship and talking about someone being good at singing, good at what they're doing, like that was the number where it just went like jaw to the floor, like, oh no, this is a really good musical. And again, to say what you will about the film itself and following whatever fucking narrative is happening, no, the music is good when you have a number like that just kind of like fucking railroads the entire thing, like stop dead in your tracks. I'm like, that I did not expect that from what was on the poster here.
And like he's giving like a very Caesar Flickerman from Hunger Games kind of presentation, like lots of teeth and screaming while doing this wonderful character voice. But once you get to where the like snooker showdown's going to be, there's some really excellent camera work in that whole scene, because like 20 minutes of the movie, maybe an upwards of that, takes place in that one location. And there's a oneer, I think it's like where it's like Kid to Break, where like he's, I think, losing like 8 frames to nothing, and he's about to get knocked out of the tournament or something. Maybe it's four at that point. And there's a oneer where like the camera is coming down from like up on the balconies where like the fancy like watchers, the bourgeoisie or whatever are up there watching. It'll come down, it'll come on Billy Kid's face. It like circles his face in this really disorienting fashion while seamlessly going up to the other side of the balcony to like look at all the punks. It comes back, and without cutting once, there were no balls on the table, and then they set them all up. Oh my, like that is really impressive for a movie like this to be pulling off.
And you had a thing there too, which I thought was really interesting. Is the film is sly in its kind of like last two musical numbers, and that there are moments where Billy Kid is sort of like his career, his entire professional career is flashing before his eyes, and they spend a lot of time on him. And I was like, up, musical numbers coming, and then it didn't. And I was like, all right, here's the song where he's going to be like, I'm going to get my shit together, and it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
And so there's this prolonged scene where Maxwell is basically running the table, where the movie's basically like, he's gonna sing, nope, he's not gonna sing, we just gotta watch him lose, nope, he's not gonna sing. And I thought that was really clever, because you kept waiting for like that comeback moment to happen in music, and they were like, nope, the turnaround, yes, when Billy starts playing well, he does have a number, but the turnaround doesn't happen in song, it happens outside of song. And that was interesting. I did not expect that. I thought there was going to be a dramatic piece where suddenly he finds his inner strength, but no, we just watched him sweatily almost lose for a good 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And we're just watching a game at that point.
Yeah, we are. We're just watching snooker. And I was like, am I into snooker? Can I be into this? Should I watch this?
Well, I was going to say too, like, I love the vampirisms of this film. Again, not being having to feed, not being, one of the lines that not Dracula, but the vampire is singing about is like, I love garlic. I'm fine with this. Like, I was born here. I wasn't born in Transylvania. Like, it is hilarious that they strip away all the vampirism and things that we think about. And the two things I really love about it is, number one, he's wearing vampire fangs to shoot a commercial, and then just takes them out, and his other fangs are just under them, just like smaller. He's like, yeah, this is what vampires really look like, you dummies. And then we are watching, as you just alluded to, the third act of the film is just watching a snooker tournament. That's all we are. Except for the fact that a vampire is cheating using magic for like some of it, and like convincing him he can't see the balls and all this shit. Like through song, obviously we're seeing it. So I admire a film that looks at its genre elements and just says, yeah, we don't need those. Those are like, he's a vampire, but like, whatever. I don't give a shit about all the other stuff. Like, we don't have the money for blood. We can't make corpses. What are you talking about? Like, no, they're going to play snooker and that's it.
I mean, it kind of repurposes like vampire lore in a completely different way, where like traditionally a lot of vampires, and they're not my favorite vampire movies, but they live in castles and come from money, and they're posh and well dressed, and they're, everyone loves them because they've been glamored, and they want they want to be Renfield. That's an element of it, but also like they're feasting on like the poor young people. Like that's a huge element of the movie, where this, the Wednesday man or whatever his name is, he's not a vampire, but he's in cahoots with the vampire because he just wants to ruin Billy Kid's life because he hates him. And like they have this tremendous long con about doing it. And it's all about just keeping like young people and the working class down. It's good at it. It uses vampire lore really well without being obvious.
It does.
The metaphorical feeding.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk a little bit about the two central performances too, because this is, I mean, as much as a rock musical can be, kind of a two-hander, right? It's really just like these two people in a kind of opposition to each other. I have never actually seen Quadrophenia, which I know is a cardinal sin if you grew up in the UK, and I'm sure our mutual friend of the site, Richard Whitaker, will come for me at some point when he listens to this and hears that. So this was, as a matter of fact, when I was kind of like, okay, I know, like, obviously I know who Phil Daniels is. I was like, what do I personally know him from? It turns out it's just Park Life by Blur.
Yeah.
That's the only firsthand experience I have with any of his work outside of this. And then there's Alan Armstrong, who is, I think, Harmony, you said it a long time ago, a really venerable character actor that's doing like really good character actor shit. So, talk a little bit about for where these performances sit for both of you, because I think they're more essential to the success of this and making this all work than people might think going in.
I mean, they need to sell you on the movie, because if they're not, like, in terms of singers, these two are not even like the strongest singers in the cast. I think Tio is good. I think the news reporter who gets like the titular Billy the Kid track with like a very large husky voice is great. The opera singer's good. Supersonic Sam has a voice that just, I love him. He's marvelous. These guys are not the best singers, but like their character work is tremendous. You have, arrogance in two different forms. One is youthful, one is, sitting from a comfortable place for several decades. Like I, for the record, have not seen Quadrophenia either. I have also only know him from Park Life. He gets up when he wants to, except on Wednesdays when he's rudely awakened by the dustman. I know all of the rambling Cockney monologues of Park Life by heart, but they are so essential to embodying their characters because they're actually quite similar to each other, but in very different ways. And I think that's why it makes it a really compelling rivalry. Like they just viscerally hate each other because of who they are, but they have very similar arrogance in common.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to have that arrogance because we've talked about the music. They are good singers, do not get me wrong, but they're not even the best singers in the actual entire film. But the sports side of it, because once again, this is also a sports film, like they sell the rivalry very well. They sell the building up. They sell the evil villain who is, literally a vampire, so he's the monster, whatever you want to say. Like he's the bad guy. They literally show it to you. But without that kind of arrogance, as you've already pointed out, you don't want to root for Billy. Like you need that to root for Billy, but at the same time, you see what Billy is willing to throw away and his ego and what he can possibly do to his entire career because he thinks he's the next hot shit. And you get both of those working in tandem in the exact way you just said, and it elevates the sports. Anything you want to say about that, like as a sports fan, as someone who is just gearing up for like playoff football and stuff like that, it matters so much because if that isn't there, it's just another sports movie. It's just depicting what happens. But when you're actually invested in who wins and who loses and the stakes are so high, they do a good job of that. I think that's actually the best thing they do together. Their chemistry playing off each other through songs, through everything, is establishing the rivalry and making us actually give a shit about watching an entire third act that is just a snooker tournament. That is an accomplishment.
Absolutely. Like we kept calling this a sports movie and it is, but also it's sports entertainment. Like these are these big pro wrestling type characters and it is very simple storytelling of a good guy and a bad guy and they want to beat the other one because I hate you and I want to be the best. It is pro wrestling in its purest essence with these large, colorful characters of a cowboy versus a vampire. That's just what their gimmick is. And that's so easy to understand.
So what you're saying is there needs to be a remake starring Chris Jericho as the vampire someday, I think.
I mean, here's the thing. He probably would be really good at it because
it's unfortunate.
He can sing. Oh, God damn it.
It's unfortunate.
I don't want to watch that, but I would watch that.
There is there's an interview from a few years ago with Daily Mail where, again, Ray Reardon, who is the person that the Green Blaze Vampire is based off of, basically says just that. He's like, this is because they're asking him to reflect on his history with snooker and like how it's changed and everything. And he's like, what happened to the characters? Like, this is entertainment. Like, why aren't people, creating characters for the public to enjoy? I was trying to find his exact quote, but that's sort of the gist of it. And I think that goes really in line with what the two of you say. And it makes me think of, in a weird kind of way, I found myself thinking a lot. And Donato, I think you'll appreciate this because I knew you kind of grew up watching this too. Harmony, I don't know if you're ever a World Series of Poker person, but like the parallel in these two things, the parallel between the two is like the 70s. It went from sort of this like renegade outlaw thing to like a little bit more mainstream. And there's this granddaddy of poker named Doyle Brunson, who sort of is the stand-in of like class and history. And there's all these like asshole bad boys. And it was just, as I was thinking about that, I was like, that's the American version of this, but it's so universal. We've mentioned wrestling, we've mentioned poker, we've mentioned snooker. Like this movie taps into why we love sports that is beyond the specific game and the, the equipment that's used. And there are fucking real sports movies that don't understand the appeal of sports. There's like baseball and football movies that don't get why we like sports as much as this vampire musical does. Like, that's embarrassing. If I made a movie and it wasn't as good as a sports movie and it wasn't as good as this, I would just quit. I would quit making movies.
but for real though, like a lot of my favorite sports movies are for sports that I don't really care that much about. Like I love Rocky. I don't give a shit about boxing.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge baseball person, yet I love Bad News Bears. I think it's one of the best sports movies ever made. And it's all about characters and overcoming and not necessarily even winning in the case of both those movies. You can lose and it still be a compelling story. It's about the adversity and the trials and the characters. And so many sports movies just don't seem to understand that. It's more about the sport and less about the people themselves playing them.
Yeah, Eddie the Eagle is mine. I had no affinity for skiing or any of that, and Eddie the Eagle like blew me away. And just what you said, it's compelling. It's the human story. It's somebody achieving, striving, and overcoming insurmountable odds, and that is what this has. Like, you know, going back to Monagle saying like World Series of Poker and stuff. Like, this is Mike Matusow getting absolutely destroyed by a rookie. I've watched this happen, and 100% like. Characters make it better. Like World Series of Poker, you would watch a guy like Mike Matusow, who was just an asshole. He was the veteran asshole. He would mouth off 24/7. But despite him being a piece of shit on the poker table, the camera was always on him because it's just drama. It's good. It's what it is. You need that there. Like if everyone just sits there and shuts up and just plays poker, am I watching that for an hour? No, of course. You need the characters. You need somebody to get up in the camera's face and like just draw the audience in. So I think this movie does that by giving us a fucking vampire.
Yes. Does anybody know the name of a male tennis player other than John McEnroe? Because I don't.
I'll get Agassi. I'll go with Agassi.
Okay, sure.
I'm a sports guy. guy.
So. Fair enough.
Carlos Alcaraz, but only because I watched the Netflix series. So that's all I got. New petition though, World Series of Poker, they need to have musical numbers. If you're going to participate, you need to have a winning song prepared to be able to do at the drop of a hat, and a losing song prepared to do at the drop of the hat. And there will be an on-site pianist who's ready to like accompany you, like an audition pianist that's just like, just give me the sheet music and let's go. So again, we're spinning gold here. I hope that
can we do some celebrity stunt casting where we get Jennifer Tilly in there?
Yes, absolutely.
As a vampire.
Yes, of course.
She's super talented at World Series of Poker. So
perfect.
She plays, right?
I know she plays poker. I just don't know where.
She's married to Phil Locke, right? I think it's Phil Locke. But she's married to a poker player, so she got way more into it.
What are you talking about?
Sorry, apologies. I broke canon. My bad.
No, kayfabe.
Kayfabe. Oh God. Oh no.
All right, so this is the point on the podcast that we always get to, where we say, how do we find an audience for this particular film? And Harmony, I feel like a couple of times you've had to answer this a few different ways. So I'm kind of curious what you're thinking maybe unlocks this movie for new audiences, considering that, you know, the easy question will start, it's on Tubi. You can watch it on Tubi right now. You can even have the phone breaks built in via the commercials. So that's good. But there's a difference between, as we always discuss on the show, between something being accessible and something being top of mind for viewers. So how do we make this top of mind?
God, it's just this movie has officially become one of my pet projects, where like we all have those films where it's like more people should know about this one. I'm going to find excuses to bring this one up in conversation, especially because I work at a movie theater / video store. So it's just like, hey, do y'all want to hear about a vampire cowboy that plays billiards and sing? And they're like, what? There's that, but I think it just wasn't available for a long time. There is a physical DVD of it that I did buy, and I will say that I don't know if it's just my copy, but it's not very good. The movie seems to run at 20 frames per second, and it plays like ass, so that sucks. And also it has no subtitles, and some of that Cockney is a little thick. So Tubi's currently the best way to watch this, commercials and all. But
no, I'm sorry. I have to interrupt you there. The subtitles in Tubi are fucking trash. There are times where like it switches to like singing in a foreign language. I'm like, no, that's still English.
It's clearly English. It's just some subtitles are better than no subtitles.
Sometimes I don't know. This kind of pushed that envelope where I was just like, you can't just be like, we didn't get it, so it's not English. Like, no, it's English. just put like unintelligible. That's fine. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
I think that's just the auto subtitles that are done for it. But I think that unfortunately a lot of things exist on Tubi and you have to go looking for them. I think if we could pull it out of Tubi and it end up somewhere better, like, you know, someone could restore this, because I think that this movie with a good restoration would be stunning. Like it's a little grainy, it's a little cheap looking, but that's also some of its charm. But like these shots, this lighting. I think that this movie could do with like a restoration and be so well rewarded for it. I think that could put it on people's radar. It's technically a horror movie, which is how we technically ended up here. Maybe Shudder would want to put it on there. Like they've had like Black Roses. Fuck it, let's throw this on there too. Why not? Then people will write reviews going, "It's not scary." 1 star. I don't know. I think word of mouth and managing to get it to graduate from just existing on Tubi is a good start.
Yeah, I actually watched this on Shout TV streaming service because it was on Tubi, and I had exactly 90 minutes to watch this movie before this recording.
Well,
and I did not have time for the commercials.
Because it's exactly like a 90-minute movie. It's like 92 minutes.
So I was like, wait, where else is this streaming? And so it's on the Shout TV addition to Prime Video. So I was like, yeah, I'll just do that there. Streaming, very good quality. Like, I mean, obviously it's still the VHS rip or whatever you want to say of it. It hasn't been restored, but you know, stream with good quality. So still though, who has the Shout TV add-on to Prime Video? Like it's one of those things where it just kind of lives in obscurity. If this ever comes out on Terrorvision in the next year, no, that's because I'm going to start texting Brad Henderson right after this recording to be like, yo, I think you need to release this, and I'm absolutely writing something for it. So like that's happening. Yeah, so when this comes out eventually in a restoration in 4K or some shit, you can thank me because I'm going to harass the hell out of Brad Henderson to do that. But
good,
that's what
I appreciate your service.
It's what it needs, though. There's no life for something like this without the archival, just whatever you want to say. Like, I don't know. Somebody was tweeting the other day about how like showing off your physical media is like capitalist or some shit, and it's not actually cool or something. But like I think it's quite the opposite, actually. Like if they did a really good release of it and people just started tweeting about it and just showing like, oh yeah, like I actually own this insane ass movie, like that does speak word of mouth and stuff like that. So I think that's the way. It's got to be the physical, super insane, bulked up release that puts it on every collector's radar, and once the collectors start talking about it, then other people will start discovering it.
I think I'm going to give an answer I haven't given before, which is always fun when I get to do that. I think that this would be really well served, at least initially, because it's a musical and it comes in these like easily segmented chunks. I think this would be really fun as a pre-show, like at a draft house. I don't know if Idiots does like pre-roll kind of stuff before movies too, like some kind of a pre-credits package, because I feel like a lot of times I see that stuff. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that some like older Nick Cage releases were sort of like fodder for pre-show type stuff. And then they became more popular and now they're regarded as well. A lot of times those like, you know, art house, grindhouse kind of like pre-trailer packages can be sort of a stealth infection vector for the films and the movies and the scenes and stuff to actually become like mainstay types movies for collectors. So I would love to see somebody, you know, rip a couple of those musical numbers from YouTube or Tubi or wherever it is, throw that in front of the next, you know, kind of camp musical or high profile rock musical or something that shows, put it in front of, you know, if Taylor Swift's movie comes back into theaters in Q1 of this year, put this as part of the pre-package for that. I think the audience would be utterly perplexed. But I think it's the rare kind of instance where that would do a lot of good. I think it would get the movie, get the scenes in front. People would walk out being like, what the hell was that like vampire pre-show thing? And that would be how it introduces to a lot of folks. So that's my answer for this one. And I will say too, I want to give a shout out in my digging around and research. There's not a lot of times where I feel like Donato and I, based on the premise of the show, can be like out niched, but I think we were out niched on this one because there is a website. It looks like it's somebody's personal blog that is dead now, RIP, but like a lot of love for you. That was called Make Mine Criterion. It's makeminecriterion.wordpress.com. And they fan casted an entire special features release for this film on Arrow Videos, including special making of features. One of them being Making BTK, extensive interviews on the film's making with cinematographer Clive Tickner, composer George Fenton, production designer Jamie Leonard, costume designer Tudor George. Sports Life Stories, Jimmy White, an ITV documentary on Jimmy White, the inspiration for Billy the Kid, archival interview with Ray Dracula Reardon, the inspiration for Maxwell Randall on the eve of the 1981 Snooker Championship. This thing goes on. There's like a whole like it is basically their version of the, you know, the press release you get with all the special features loaded onto the DVD. They went all in. And so whoever the hell you are, if you were running Make Mine Criterion, if this was your baby, we saw what you did. We respect what you did. We would buy the shit out of that Blu-ray. Arrow, we we think maybe it's a good idea.
I mean, Arrow's British. Like, this would be probably a good fit for them. Like, as far as nicheness is concerned, I don't know if y'all keep a track record of this, but have you done movies that have literally 0 Rotten Tomato reviews before? Because this one has none.
I want to say yes. I want to say there's 1 or 2 we have looked at that don't. I mean, like real direct to video mid 2000s. Where did this even come out and how kind of films? So like there are a few, but yes, this is one of many. Sorry, this is one of the few that we have.
Gotcha.
And every now and then we the people we like that come on the show that want to do something like pre 2000s, we're totally cool with. That's probably the best chance that we have is some of that stuff that came out in like the 80s. There was no like archival Rotten Tomato stuff. And then they just haven't gotten around to like backlogging, whatever kind of contemporary reviews might have come out. So nothing jumps to mind though. It's a good question. I think we'll need to figure that one out, Donato. Maybe we'll put that in the bumper is to there's a question coming up you want to know the answer to, and the answer is this, because that's fun. Harmony, I feel like we need to have like a green jacket or something for folks that come on. You're part of the 3-Timers Club now. It was so exciting to get to talk to you again. It's so exciting to have just another really fun. You bring us fucking fun movies. Not everybody brings us fun movies.
I've gathered that.
That is, we appreciate you for that. And I want to give you a chance to hype up anything you've got going on, with This Ends at Prom or anything that might be going on in video. It's just an opportunity where people can connect with you on social media and see what might be in the pipeline for you.
Yeah, I mean, so I host This Ends at Prom with my wife BJ, who's been on the show a couple times now. And we talk about teen girl movies that she grew up watching and loving. And, we've extended that. We've gone all the way back to, I think, Black Christmas 74 is the oldest movie. And we're talking about stuff as recently as like 2023, soon to be 2024, when we inevitably do Mean Girls the Musical. And we just talk about how they hold up in their era, the gender and the sexuality of it, and really try to give a lot of love to a much maligned genre there. Our own version of what you all do here. And if you want to follow that, that's at This Ends at Prom on social media. And I'm at Velocitraptor on Twitter and Instagram. So like I'm around. Sometime this year, I think in the first quarter, the sleep book about sleepaway camp that me and my wife spent way too long writing should be coming out. And I don't know when, but if you want to follow me, then I'll have an update for you as soon as I know.
That's very exciting. I feel like I miss out on stuff now. I know you guys had announced that a while ago, but I'm worried I'm going to miss it because I'm not super active on Twitter anymore. So
it's fine. Either
Donato, you are in charge of telling me when BJ and Harmony's book is available for pre-order, please.
Dude, even I've kind of tapered off on the bird, whatever, the X, whatever you want to talk about it. And yeah, it's just a hellscape.
I mean, we'll post it other places. So
that's fine. Around. Yeah, we'll see that. We'll see that. BJ's been more active on Blue Sky, which I'm really happy about because I get to see her content over there now too.
Oh yeah, I'm also on Blue Sky at Harmony Colangelo. I don't post it. I forget about that one a lot. I think I talk more shit on that one, which is fun.
Yeah,
it's got a smaller fan base, so that means I can get away with saying shit.
Yeah. Donato, what you got in the pipeline? What do you want to share today?
Same handle as always at DonatoBomb on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Twitter, X, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, all the socials. You can find me at DonatoBomb. And then, yeah, it's just been a lot of catch up for the end of the year for the last like 2 weeks. So I just posted some like end of year recaps on a few different sites. Hit up my Authory if you just want to know where they all are, because I don't even know where I posted half my shit. And yeah, I have like 5 pieces hitting this week alone, so I don't fucking know what's going on. I have so much to do. So just follow me and I'll tell you where it is.
Great. So Donato's at the status quo over there, like barely controlled chaos, which we love to see. As for myself, you can follow me on Blue Sky. I think it's Monagle, whatever. I don't remember. I don't spend a lot of time looking at my own profile, but you can find me. I'm on there. As always, you can go to certifiedforgotten.com and check out some of the excellent writing that we're publishing week in and week out. I would also strongly encourage folks to go check out our Patreon, patreon.com/certifiedforgotten, because we have recently added a free tier just for our newsletter. We got the fuck off of Substack. We're not going back to Substack. So if you want to sign up, it won't cost anything. You don't have to put in any kind of credit card information. It's just your email address. You'll get our newsletter delivered to your inbox every week, where we basically give you a little behind the scenes peek of what we've been up to, the decision process that went into greenlighting some of the pieces. It's always fun to see what people pitched and how the actual piece turned out too. So certifiedforgotten.com, visit us at patreon.com/certifiedforgotten. You make our world go around, and we appreciate you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go out on a limb here, say, Harmony, that this is not the last time we're going to have you on the podcast. So until time number 4, it was great to see you. We'll see you again soon.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to whatever nonsense I find for another fun movie to bring.
The bar has gotten impossibly fucking high. So good luck to you. Donato, take us out.